Long before the earliest men stood upright upon the red earth, there was a formless place of swirling dust and hidden potential. Each dawn saw new shapes clumping together only to dissolve by evening, as though the very ground refused to sustain life. Above this vast primal plain, the Orishas watched with patient hopes. Among them was Obatala, the gentle sculptor, known both for measured precision and boundless creativity. He had observed the shapeless expanse for eons and felt a persistent longing to transform it into something enduring, a place for living beings to thrive. He often strolled through this primordial land with a confident, unhurried step, testing the soil with his large toes, his robes trailing behind him like a fragment of twilight. As Obatala ran his fingers through the red dust, the granules tickled his palms, whispering about their readiness to be shaped. The other Orishas waited, exchanging meaningful glances, well aware of Obatala's desire to give form to the formless. They also knew that forging new beings directly from clumps of earth and clay demanded a delicate melding of power and tenderness rarely balanced in the divine realm. There came a moment when the swirl and shift of the soil seemed to create a low chant that pulsed through the ether. Interpreting this as a sign, Obatala knelt by the largest mound of red earth he could find. He closed his eyes, murmuring a soft request to Olaran, the supreme force that governed all creation. Warmth radiated from within him, guided by that transcendent energy, a gentle drizzle of cosmic essence that seeped into the clay. When Obatala opened his eyes, his hands glowed with quivering light. He brought both palms upon the mound. Under the careful pressure of his fingertips, the dust and water fused into a malleable mass. He felt its warmth pulse faintly in time with his own heartbeat, and a wide grin brightened his face. For many days and nights, Obatala worked in quiet devotion. He shaped the clay into rudimentary figures, paying meticulous attention to each curve of the torso, the bend of an arm, the arch of a forehead. The Orishas and lesser spirits came to watch. Some hovered close, thrilled by the memory of their own forging, while others observed from a distance, uncertain as to whether these infant forms might awaken to sentience. At times, Obatala's focus would slip and a shape turned irregular or crooked, but he always paused to smooth the edges before pressing forward. More than once he caught himself drifting from benevolent artistry to reckless hurry, yet each time he regained composure, prayed to Olaran, and refined the clay with unwavering attention. By the time Obatala grew sure of the proportions, he had formed dozens of figures, small humanoid shapes all lined up in neat rows. Their clay limbs resembled slender reeds, their torsos sturdy but flexible, and their blank faces waited in restful silence. Obatala recognized that they weren't yet truly alive. At best, they lay in a suspended state, each bearing a potential spark. Equipped with the knowledge that only Olaran could bestow genuine life, Obatala prepared a sacred rite. He hummed ancient songs of the Orishas, calling upon the cosmic energies. The wind bent in silent reverence, and even the dust storms ceased their swirling, giving the land brief moments of stillness. Then the spirit of Olaran arrived as a faint breeze that carried an otherworldly brightness. Each of the moulded figures shivered, first with a single twitch, and then a gentle stirring of clay arms and legs. A moment later, they opened eyes that shone with a faint glimmer of dawnlight, each pair uniquesome, reflecting deep amber, others soft grey. The sculptures turned living, breathing beings, though some were imperfect. With a leg slightly tapered or an ear placed too high, the splendour of their emergence transcended any flaws. They stood with cautious steps, gazing at their maker, receptive to the mysteries of existence yet to unfold. Obatala guided them patiently, teaching them how to walk on their clay feet and gently training them in the rhythms of the land. He told them they would be known as humans, individuals given spirit and shape by the Orisha's collaboration, entrusted to fill the vast emptiness of the earth with song, warmth, and community. Among the earliest of them there was a young man named Ao, whose name signified joy. Ao stood out from the others, thanks to a curiosity that sparked in his eyes whenever he encountered something unfamiliar. Batala recognized Ao's thirst for knowledge, and he secretly held high hopes for the young man's capacity to inspire his fellow humans. In time, the humans grew bolder, venturing across hills and streams, learning to fish and gather what sparse vegetation the land provided. They settled in small clusters, forging relationships sealed by shared laughter and gentle benevolence. But the rest of the Orishas looked upon this new race with cautious anticipation. They knew that none could survive unchallenged. Dark forces often lurked in the cosmic fabric, waiting to stir havoc upon unsuspecting creations. And so, while the humans were sleeping and building their simple huts, the Orishas debated whether they should place guardians among them or allow them to develop self-reliance. Amid these endless discussions, Urunmila, the Orisha of wisdom, prophesied a coming threat from malevolent spirits who resented the birth of mortals made from clay, seeing them as weak mockeries of what it truly meant to exist. Obatala watched these growing dangers with concern. He reasoned that if fully grown human beings still struggled to protect themselves, perhaps new forms of living clay could serve a protective role, not merely shaped to thrive but to guard. This gave birth to a bold idea that would become the second great act of sculpting. Gathering a fresh batch of earth, Obatala began to mold statues, primed not for ordinary human life, but for vigilant watchfulness, endowed with reflexes sharper than mortal reflexes and the unflagging endurance of molded stone. Their arms would be thick, their chests broad, and their faces set firm with an unwavering sense of purpose. They were continuously focusing particularly on resilience and fortitude. Into their clay arms he etched designs reminiscent of the twisted roots of the sacred Iroko tree, symbolizing steadfastness, and he carved the swirling motifs of Yoruba tradition around their limbs to remind them of the cosmic harmony they must safeguard. Before dawn one morning, when the horizon's gentle purple turned into an orange glow, Obatala invoked Olaran once more. With a hushed command, he infused these new sculptures with the same animating spark given to the humans. One by one they stirred to life, each letting out a deep, echoing hum cascading across the land. Standing over 7 feet tall, each clay warrior resembled a human only in silhouette. Their faces possessed no soft features, merely a set of eyebrows arched in perpetual vigilance, along with a stern jawline. Their voices were constrained by design. It was unnecessary for them to speak often. They were guardians first and foremost. Most of the time they communicated with layered gestures of their vast hands, or a rhythmic pounding on their chest plates, which produced percussive vibrations that others of their kind understood intuitively. The humans, sensing a new presence nearby, nervously approached to examine these looming figures. At first, men like Io were guarded, uncertain about how to treat these silent watchers. But soon enough they recognized the protective aura emanating from the living statues. This quiet legion stationed themselves at the front lines of every human settlement, scanning forests and plains with steady, unblinking eyes made from polished onyx. For a while, it appeared that the new guardians helped humanity flourish without conflict. The living statues protected farmland from rampaging wildlife and guided travelers away from treacherous cliff edges. In the evenings, they stood still as stone pillars, their rigid silhouettes visible against the moonlit sky. Young children who once feared the inhuman shapes quickly found reassurance in the gentle gestures these guardians used. A slow kneel, so a child could touch the smooth, uniformly warm surface of their arms, or a protective hand to guide them away from danger. This harmonious existence did not go unnoticed by darker entities. Deep below the Earth's crust, in caverns saturated with stale air, dwelled the Ajagon malevolent spirits, whose hearts seethed with envy. They abhorred seeing the blossoming life of mortals under the watchful eyes of these powerful clay guardians. From their subterranean lairs, the Ajagon slithered through cracks and roamed the land under veils of darkness, searching for a way to undo Obatala's creation. On nights when thunder shook the heavens, they seeped out like noxious fog, sowing seeds of confusion and mistrust among humans. But though they tried to rend the new race asunder through deception, they could not eclipse the unwavering presence of the Guardians, who remained steadfast in defense of their charges, shining as silent beacons in the gloom. In an act of desperation, one of the Arjagun's leaders, called Irinwo, concocted a plan to corrupt the Clay Guardians themselves. He reasoned that if the Watchers were turned against their own purpose, humanity would crumble rapidly. Gathering a swirl of malignant energy, Irinwo and his acolytes ambushed one of the Guardians who stood alone by a corner of farmland. With a cacophony of hissing incantations, the Arjagun poured a dark poison into the earthen being's thick limbs. The Guardian reeled, letting out an otherworldly howl that reverberated over the fields. The clay flesh cracked under the strain of this evil influence. For several painful moments, the Guardian twisted on its feet before falling to one knee, mired in an invisible battle for its essence. Hearing the thunderous cry, close to a dozen Guardians arrived, racing across the fields with ground-shaking strides. Seeing that they were outnumbered, Irinwo and his cronies scattered, leaving a vicious swirl of malevolence behind. But though the Arjagun fled, the evil had already begun to burrow its way into the clay warrior's form. Cracks erupted like crooked veins over the Guardian's chest, releasing lines of scorched dust. Uncertain how to cure their companion, the other Watchers huddled close, letting out worried vibrations, until Obatala sensed their distress and materialized among them. Seeing the battered statue, the divine sculptor knelt beside it, placed a hand over the damaged chest, and channeled restorative energy. Slowly, the cracks pulled back together, their edges smoothing out. Most wounds vanished beneath the healing wave, but a faint scar remained, like a malformed groove over the warrior's torso. Obatala realized he had only just prevented the complete corruption. A moment more, and the Guardian might have turned against its own kin. Obatala knew that a profound threat lurked in every shadow, so he prepared another layer of protection. Sitting quietly at his work area by the largest river, he moulded small, intricate amulets from the same red clay. Each amulet, a thin disc etched with the same swirling motifs found on the warriors, carried an inherent protective force, meant to resist corruption. Obatala called the humans together for a sacred gathering around a fire. Though they didn't entirely comprehend the cosmic precariousness of their existence, they felt the heaviness in Obatala's voice as he said, "A dangerous corruption seeks to claim these lands. You must unite in vigilance." One by one, the clay guardians knelt so that Obatala could place an amulet directly upon each warrior's chest. At first contact, these charms fused seamlessly, releasing a faint glow that settled under the surface as if anchored within. In response, humans ventured to make offerings to the guardians, presenting them with sculptures of their own creation. They shaped small figurines from leftover clay to express gratitude, tiny versions of the protectors with outstretched arms or watchful expressions. While the guardians could not smile, they conveyed approval through low, harmonic murmurs. The clay watchers and humans grew closer, forging a bond of mutual loyalty. A sense of quiet courage took root among the people, as they realized that even though the Aegigun might slither back, they would not be alone in any conflict. Unwilling to abandon their mission easily, the Aegigun regrouped, now convening under a chaotic canopy of lightning and swirling winds conjured by their vile enchantments. Leading them was Irinwo, who glided across the ground with black smoke swirling around his form. He snarled a wordless command, and an entire wave of lesser fiends advanced across the plains. Clouds of shrieking, avian-like creatures soared overhead with talons extended, while shadow-like beasts prowled, jaws dripping with thick venom. Their objective was to plunge the mortal settlements into terror, break the Guardians' ranks, and subdue the Clay Watchers for good. Speed was crucial, since each moment gave Obatala and the Orishas more time to intervene. It descended at midnight, when the only light came from a thin crescent moon obscured by drifting clouds. The Guardians sensed the malignant presence first. Standing in silent readiness, they beat their clay fists against their chests in unison, letting out a resonant pulse that alerted the entire settlement. Ayo, who had become a leader among the small human village, awakened with a start. He grabbed a torch and roused his neighbours, spreading the alarm. Women and men scurried into huts to gather children, or else stood with spears, crude weapons they had hastily learned to craft. Overhead, the avian shadows screeched, swooping down to snatch at livestock and scatter embers from the torches. The humans trembled but held firm, buoyed by the presence of the towering figures by their side. Then came the first clash. An enormous wolf-like spirit lunged at a guardian's side, gnashing its teeth into the clay surface. Instead of the soft give of flesh, the creature's teeth scraped against a hardened layer. The guardian pivoted, stone-like arms swinging in a wide arc that hurled the beast onto its back. Faster than it could regain its footing, another guardian jumped in, landing with an impact that shook the earth and ended the struggle. All around, the Watchers formed protective walls, linking arms to create impregnable barriers against the chaos. Irinwo observed from a distance, hissing with frustration as he tossed malevolent incantations that swirled like black serpents toward the Guardians. The Watchers with the amulets, however, stood unaffected, their previously fragile clay surfaces reinforced with Obatala's powerful blessings. They advanced steadily, towering shapes in the night, reminiscent of ancient mountains come to life. While the lesser Achigan found themselves outmatched by the warrior's fluid strength, Irinwo exerted more destructive force, channeling a swirling vortex of unholy energy. Crackling arcs of black lightning struck 3 guardians at once, forcing them down onto their knees. For a split second, it looked as though the Watchers might crumble. Hairline fractures brightened with jagged lines, and their amulets flickered uncertainly, but the Watchers persevered, each companion stepping in to lay a supportive hand upon the other's back, combining their energies. Together they rose, uniting their shared power into a single bulwark of clay and spirit. Waves of radiant energy surged through them, repelling Irinwo's dark magic. The humans witnessed this surge with astonishment. Recalling Obatala's lessons, rallied the villagers to stand behind the Guardians, chanting improvised songs meant to embolden them, chants that were basic yet brimming with raw belief. The synergy of mortal voices and living clay resonated across the battlefield, drowning out the shrieks of the Arjagun. Irinwo staggered under the onslaught of combined human prayers and Guardian strength. His black vortex sputtered, the swirling shadows thinning like clouds in an emerging sun. Clutching his chest as though something essential were being torn from him, Irinwo attempted to retreat. He let out an unearthly shriek, calling for his remaining fiends to scatter. But they too were trapped in the unwavering ring formed by the Guardians. The Watchers advanced, step by step, pushing the vile horde back toward the fractures in the earth from which they had come. In a last desperate attempt, Irinwo conjured an overflowing mass of black tar-like essence to block the Guardians' pursuit. The tar hissed and sizzled, burning through the ground. One Guardian sank knee-deep into the glowing muck, seemingly trapped by the darkness threatening to dissolve his clay form. The Watchers close by hammered their fists upon the soil, generating ripples that destabilized the tar's ominous grip. At the same time, a group of villagers brandished torches, flinging fire at the seething mass until it recoiled under the heat. With a heavy groan, the trapped Guardian pulled himself free, leaving lumps of scorched clay behind as he stumbled forward. He would later bear scars reminiscent of black scabs along one leg, a visual testament to the violence of the encounter. But even wounded, he would not relent. Realizing that their dark spells were failing and the Watchers could not be easily corrupted, the Ajagun had no choice but to withdraw. It was a ragged retreat, beaten, scattered, and drained of any momentum to continue their rampage. Irinwo, his smoky aura flickering with each step, vanished, along with the rest of his fiends, into hollow cracks in the earth, leaving a noxious aftertaste in the air. Slowly, the Guardians relaxed, their arms lowering from their combative stance. The humans stepped out from behind them, silent in reverence for what they had witnessed. Dawn's early light began to break, washing away the night's terrors with gentle warmth. From the eastern sky, a faint shimmer announced the presence of Urunmila, who commended the Guardians for their resolute defense. The Orisha's voice carried an air of solemn pride. "You have proven worthy and unyielding, even in the face of dire threat. This night will become legend, mortals, and guardians bound by mutual grace." At that moment, Obatala himself appeared, praising not only the Watcher's valor, but also the humans' resolve under such relentless assault. The battered guardians bowed. Their amulets, though dulled by the battle's severity, retained a sliver of their original radiant glow. Obatala approached each one in gratitude, running a gentle hand along cracked surfaces, consoling them with the promise of aid. "Though you bear scars, you have fulfilled your purpose beyond my expectations," he murmured, pride evident in his tone. Despite the broken huts, charred fields, and bruised spirits, the humans found hope in the aftermath. While they mourned their lost livestock and the destruction left behind, they also recognized that their hearts had been tempered. They had gained courage and learned just how resilient they could be when bonded in purpose. In the weeks that followed, as the fields were replanted and new huts rebuilt, the Guardians helped the humans salvage supplies from the wreckage. They pushed enormous stones into position, helped erect sturdier walls, and took watchful shifts day and night so the people could sleep without fear. Over time, a shared mythology bloomed in the telling and retelling of that fateful night. Children gathered around fires to hear elders recount how silent, living statues had defended them from clawed monsters and swirling darkness. They learned how Ale and others raised their voices in song to fortify the Guardians' resolve. In these stories, the Watchers were presented not just as mighty saviors, but as living proof that divine forces, when wielded with kindness and unity, could bestow unimaginable gifts upon the world. Possessing bodies of molded clay and hearts radiant with cosmic grace, the Guardians proved that the simplest elements, dust, water, spirit, could be fused into an enduring alliance. In time, Ayo and others in the village, inspired by Obatala's artistry, asked if they might learn to shape clay for themselves. The divine sculptor, smiling at their curiosity, gladly showed them how to gather the right soil, knead it into a malleable paste, and combine it with water, care, and spiritual focus. While humans lacked the power to imbue clay with life, they could, in their own modest way, create earthen vessels and decorative tokens that honored the Watcher. They fashioned bowls and sculptures for daily use, forging a new tradition of craftsmanship that resonated through the growing community. Some shaped small warrior figures ready for a watchful stance. Others made fertility dolls or intricately etched vessels used in communal feasts, all made possible by the enduring presence of the Guardians. Even so, mortal memory has failings. Generations would come and go, and across centuries some might begin to question the living clay warriors' aura. Some doubted whether these silent protectors had truly been moulded by Obatala's touch. Others found new idols and beliefs, turning away from the old stories as their societies expanded. Yet, the Guardians remained on the periphery, unfading watchers simply standing vigil, answering when calamities threatened. Periodically, rumors emerged of monstrous attacks in remote villages, quickly quelled by giant shapes pushing through tangles of forests or surging across plains. Those bearers of doubt might question the living statue's existence until they saw footprints the size of small ponds, or found stretches of scorched ground where presumably no living man could have stood a chance. To this day, in hidden corners of the Yoruba land spaces rarely traversed by modern roads, people still speak in hushed tones about silent watchers glimpsed at twilight. They say these Guardians pause at the edges of villages, their onyx eyes scanning the horizons for any threat, poised to spring into action should another horde of Arjugun emerge. Children, wide-eyed and full of wonder, giggle when told about the day the watchers first came to life. Sometimes, a child might be startled by the shape of a guardian looming behind a fallen palm tree, only to find it unmoving as sculpted rock. Yet, a closer inspection might reveal the faint hum emanating from within that earthen shell, proof of the unwavering vigilance beneath the facade of stillness. Obatala, by now considered the ancient marvel of the Orishas, occasionally reappears in the dreams of human artists. They claim the divine sculptor speaks in gentle riddles, urging them to merge creativity with compassion. Within those dreams, a swirl of primordial dust offers glimpses of the day the watchers were forged. Many awaken with fresh ideas for sculptures, paintings, or poems that celebrate unity or honor the guardian's sacrifice. Thus, the spirit of that first act of creation continues to burn within the hearts of those who remember. And so it stands that humanity, though fragile, is protected by the unwavering forms of living clay. These silent watchers, birthed from formless dust by the skillful hands of Obatala, stand as humbling reminders that even in a world fraught with corruption and darkness, something noble, protective, and steadfast can be shaped from the simplest mixture of earth and spirit. Their unceasing resolve shows that all creation is part of a timeless tapestry, woven with strands of both mortal and divine essence. Should the storms of chaos ever rise again, the guardians shall be there, silent and solid, proving to any who doubt that compassion and unity are the most unbreakable forces of all.